My name is Gage. I am 32 years old, and I was standing at the altar. My life was supposed to start right now, at this exact moment. The woman walking toward me was Seraphina, who was 28 years old. I thought she was everything a man could want: beautiful, charming, and devoted. The enormous reception hall was packed with 300 guests. Every single seat was filled with friends, colleagues, and family. This included my father, Richard, who was 60 years old, a man I had always looked up to and respected deeply. This wedding had cost me almost every single dollar of my savings, but standing there, watching her approach, it felt completely worth the enormous price. Everything felt perfect, impossibly, blindingly perfect. But the perfection was a lie, and the blindness was starting to lift. For the last 3 months, a small, dark suspicion had been growing inside me. It started small, like a tiny stone in my shoe, but it grew into a painful, constant lump in my gut. I had seen my father and Seraphina exchanging strange, loaded glances at family dinners. They were too quick to look away when I entered a room. There was a secret between them, a bad one, and it was now too late to stop the wedding. I dismissed the doubt at first. I tried to push it out of my mind every time it surfaced. It was ridiculous. It was my father, the man who taught me how to ride a bike and how to negotiate a contract. He was my rock, and she was my fiancée, the woman I was minutes away from marrying. They were family, and they were supposed to love me, but the small, cold feeling of dread refused to die. It became a constant, low-grade hum of terror. 2 weeks ago, the fear became too much to bear. I knew I had to move, or I would be ruined forever. I made the single, most important call that would ultimately save me. I contacted an old college acquaintance who now worked as a private security consultant. I explained I needed a routine sweep of the hotel security logs for our family's rooms, citing an absurd, invented concern about a stolen wedding gift that was supposedly hidden in my father's room. My connection was smart. He understood the real dark motive immediately. He didn't ask questions or judge. He just promised me that he would have a file of all room access and security reports before the ceremony started. The waiting was agony, but the action had begun. I was pacing the groom's changing room, my tuxedo feeling stiff and tight. I had just managed to choke down a glass of water when the text message arrived. It was from the security consultant. The message was short and contained a single encrypted file attached. It was time. I excused myself from the well-meaning groomsman and opened the file in the solitude of the groom's private changing room, my hands shaking only slightly. The file contained a chronological security log and door key access report for the presidential suite, the most expensive room, which my father, Richard, was occupying. My breath caught sharp and painful in my chest. I scrolled quickly to the key data. There it was. Seraphina's key card was used to enter the room at 2 a.m. last Tuesday. The entry and exit times were perfectly clear on the log. The system showed a continuous 3-hour stay inside my father's suite. I had the proof. The blood drained completely from my face, replaced by a surge of pure, freezing, absolute rage. It was the two of them. They had conspired. The rage was so total it felt like a silent scream tearing through my body. I folded the printed log and put it in the inner pocket of my tuxedo. I returned to the ceremony room and maintained the most perfect poker face I had ever managed in my entire life. No one could know. The plan had completely changed instantly. This entire wedding was no longer a beautiful union of two souls. It was now a loaded platform for vengeance, a launchpad for their utter ruin. I signaled subtly to my best man, my closest friend, Alex, who was 32 years old. He was standing near the entrance, looking ready to go. I walked toward him and leaned in, my voice low and completely devoid of warmth. I whispered a new, urgent instruction into his ear. Get the audio-visual team ready. I need full, total control of the main projection screen and the microphone during the toast. Give them $50 and tell them it's an emergency family video. Alex, seeing the dead, cold look in my eyes, nodded without a single question. He knew this was not a joke. I walked the last few steps to the altar. The game had begun. The ceremony began. The words of the vows were a complete blur, a ridiculous, theatrical performance I was now forced to endure until I reached the final scene. I repeated the lines, my mind completely detached from the stupid promise I was making. As Seraphina stood beside me, beautiful and serene, the minister reached the climax of the ceremony and asked for the final blessing. Seraphina leaned in close to me. She thought it was a tender, intimate moment, a final, secret goodbye to my single life. Her breath was warm against my ear, but her words were absolute ice. "I slept with your father," she whispered, the quiet words carrying the weight of a truck. She pulled back and instantly smiled at the entire crowd, a look of smug, satisfied confidence on her face. She was a woman who thought she held all the power and all the secrets. My body went instantly rigid. The entire marriage was not just over. It was a massive, controlled explosion waiting to happen in the middle of a wedding reception. I couldn't move. I felt the pure, massive weight of her revelation crash down on me. I looked past her, toward the front row. My father, Richard, was sitting there, looking completely proud and powerful, like the benevolent patriarch. I met his eyes. He gave me a small, knowing nod, a nod of silent, shared victory that he foolishly mistook as the end of the ceremony. The nod was the final, total insult. It was an acknowledgement of their dark conspiracy, a message that they had planned this and won, right in my face, right here at the altar. The depth of the betrayal, a combined, coordinated attack from the two people I had trusted the most in my entire life, was utterly soul-crushing. The pain was real, sharp, and massive. But the pain quickly sharpened itself into a cold, unbreakable weapon in my hand. I would use it to destroy them both completely. The ceremony was finally finished. The crowd, oblivious to the immense, silent war that had just been declared, moved toward the reception hall. The air was loud, festive, and completely light. It was sickening. We reached the enormous, beautifully decorated head table. The MC was a professional, full of energy. He introduced me for the traditional groom's toast. I walked to the microphone stand and grabbed the mic, testing it with a quick tap. The noise in the room immediately stopped. 300 pairs of eyes were instantly focused entirely on me. Seraphina stood right next to me, her hand resting possessively and triumphantly on my arm. My father, Richard, was seated at a nearby table reserved for the close family, smiling his powerful, self-satisfied, cruel smile. The moment of maximum audience exposure was here. I began my speech. My voice was completely calm, almost unnervingly so, a perfect mask of control. "Thank you all for coming," I said, looking out at the faces. "This is truly a celebration of family, of deep, enduring love, and of the most basic thing of all, trust." Seraphina squeezed my arm tightly, believing completely that she had won the whole game. She thought I was just doing the traditional happy speech. "I want to specifically thank the two most important people in my life," I continued, drawing out the words. "My father, Richard, who taught me absolutely everything about life and loyalty, and Seraphina, my beautiful bride, who taught me a very important, lasting lesson about deception." The crowd chuckled politely, thinking it was a cute, nervous joke about marriage. But Richard started to shift uncomfortably in his chair. He was the only one who realized the temperature had just dropped. I moved quickly and decisively. My voice was calm when I addressed my friend. I handed the microphone gently to Alex. I walked a few steps to the head table, pulled a small, black cable from the inner pocket of my tuxedo jacket, and plugged it instantly into the main media box, completely overriding the MC's cheerful system. The two massive projection screens, which had been meant for a cheesy slideshow of baby pictures and happy memories, instantly switched. They were replaced by a new, stark white title in giant, ominous black letters. "The Truth About My Wedding Day." The crowd noise died suddenly and completely, replaced by a deep, confused, and worried silence that filled the huge ballroom. Seraphina gasped, finally looking at me with dawning, absolute horror. She knew the game was over. I clicked the button on the small, hidden remote I held in my palm. The screens instantly filled with the hotel security log file I had received an hour earlier. The data was simple, clear, and damning beyond any possible defense. The text was huge and visible to every single person in the hall. It read, Room 1201, Richard's Suite. Keycard access, Seraphina, 28. Date, 3 days ago. Time, 2 a.m., 5 a.m. I grabbed the microphone back from Alex. My voice was now loud, raw, and shaking with pure, controlled power. This is the true story of how Seraphina celebrated our wedding week. I announced to the hundreds of witnesses, she taught me deception because she was sleeping with my father. The entire hall instantly erupted in a massive, chaotic wave of noise, gasps, and furious shouts. The hall was total chaos, a scene of immediate, loud, uncontrolled horror and shock. I ignored the noise and pointed the microphone directly at Richard. You, father, I said, my voice heavy with utter devastation, a mixture of pain and final hatred. You stood there and watched her walk to me at the altar, knowing you had violated every single code of family and basic human decency. Richard stood up, his face instantly purple with rage and shame. This is a lie, Gage, he roared, trying to stop the noise. It's a setup. I turned my gaze, cold and final, to Seraphina. Did you whisper the truth to me just now? I asked her, my voice low and demanding. Her silence was the loudest, most damning sound in the room, an absolute confirmation of their shared guilt. I had held back the final, most brutal punch. I clicked the remote again. The screen instantly shifted to a high-quality video clip. It was date-stamped and time-stamped, taken directly from the hotel's hallway security camera outside the suite. It showed Seraphina, wearing nothing but a dressing gown, being led into Richard's suite at 2:03 a.m. It then showed her leaving at 4:58 a.m., adjusting her hair. The footage was irrefutable. It was the visual smoking gun. The hard evidence was presented to every single guest, every family member, and every friend. The perfect, beautiful wedding had become the most spectacular public train wreck in the city's history. Seraphina was completely shattered. She tried to run, stumbling blindly off the stage and pushing through the tables of terrified guests. I spoke into the microphone, my voice stopping her in her tracks before she reached the door. Wait, Seraphina, don't forget your ring. She stopped and turned back. Her face was a mask of pure, desperate panic and ruined greed. The engagement ring you're wearing, the custom-cut 2-carat diamond, I bought it 1 month ago. The receipt is right here. I clicked to a slide, showing the enormous purchase receipt, clearly dated before the betrayal. I'm legally requesting its immediate return. The condition of the gift was based on a commitment you clearly broke by sleeping with my father. Richard, seeing his entire reputation and perhaps his entire marriage to my mother vanish in front of his eyes, finally tried to salvage the situation. Son, please, we can talk about this later. It was a mistake, he pleaded, his voice cracking with desperation. There's nothing left to talk about, I said, addressing the room, making sure everyone heard the finality. The loyalty is gone. The trust is gone. You both ruined my wedding, father. Now I will ensure your ruin is equally public and permanent. I had secured their social death. I turned deliberately to the two men who looked professional and serious, sitting near the back table. They were the next weapon. I pointed directly to the two men at the back table, making them the new focus of the room's attention. These gentlemen are from my legal team, I said, clearly and professionally. They are here to serve Seraphina with an immediate suit for financial fraud, recovering every penny I spent on wedding preparations and gifts since the betrayal occurred. Then I turned my attention back to my father. And they are also here to serve Richard with a lawsuit for emotional distress and breach of fiduciary duty as a family member. I had not just exposed them, I had protected my money with a legal firewall and armed myself with the law, ensuring that the revenge would be complete and devastatingly expensive for both of them. I placed the microphone gently, deliberately, onto the head table. The high-pitched feedback squeaked slightly, but I ignored it. I felt the immense weight of the last 3 months of agony, suspicion, and pain lift entirely from my shoulders. The revenge was clean, brutal, and completely finished. I was no longer a humiliated victim. I walked off the stage. I walked right past Seraphina, who was now sitting crumpled on the floor, weeping uncontrollably. I walked right past Richard, who was arguing furiously and uselessly with my lawyer. I stopped briefly at the large double doors leading out of the reception hall. As I reached the exit, I heard a woman's voice stand up. It was my Aunt Carol, who was 60 years old, a woman known for her outspoken honesty. Her voice was loud and clear. "Seraphina is a tramp. Richard, you should be ashamed of yourself." This was the moment their social world utterly collapsed. The guests began filing out quickly, not to celebrate, but to escape the toxic, ruined scene. I saw my mother, her face shattered and pale with shock, leave the room. She walked right past Richard without saying a single word, her pain a silent accusation. My public revenge had protected her from a future of quiet, living lies. The aftermath was already total. Seraphina was cornered by my lawyers, who were professionally serving her with a thick packet of legal papers right there on the ruined dance floor. Her entire dream of a comfortable, rich life was completely over. The wedding cancellation meant that the vendor costs and the contract penalties were now legally her financial responsibility, not mine. Richard was left completely alone on the stage, facing the absolute wrath of my mother and the immediate public shame of a lifetime. The exclusive social circle and the business community that supported him were now witnessing his complete disgrace firsthand. I pushed the heavy door open and walked out of the hotel and into the beautiful wedding daylight. I felt lighter and cleaner than I had in months. I put out my phone and immediately called Alex. "Cancel the honeymoon suite," I said, my voice calm. "I need a flight out tonight. Just book it for me. I'm leaving alone." I had just lost a fiancé and a father in a single hour, but I had saved my entire future and my fortune. The pain of the betrayal was real and deep, but the sweet, pure taste of victory was better. I had armed myself only with the cold, hard truth and delivered a public blow that could not be countered or repaired. Seraphina was now in the world of legal and financial ruin, professionally exposed as a fraud and a gold digger on the grandest stage possible. Richard's standing, both within the family structure and the business community, was shattered beyond any hope of repair. They were not happy, redeemed, or benefited. They faced utter, absolute downfall and disgrace. I, Gage, was walking away, single, solvent, and completely free of their dark conspiracy. The wedding day, which had cost me every dollar of my savings, was the most expensive, most satisfying public funeral I ever paid for.